Hello everyone and welcome to this new edition of Business Africa. This week on our show we will zoom on finance and agriculture as well as the relationship between China and Africa. But first, let's get on with the show with our top stories today. In Benin, young people turn to learning Chinese to facilitate their integration into the workforce.
The reason that motivated me to choose the Chinese language is that I noticed there are many job opportunities with China.
The merger of two Central African stock exchanges, a winning bet as investors flock to Douala's regional financial market.
We, as professionals, are very satisfied because it still allows us to have a common discourse vis-à-vis those wishing to invest in the stock markets or to float their companies.
Organic farming craze in Nairobi. Kenya's capital is riding the wave of urban agriculture.
We grow everything, but we especially encourage people to grow local vegetables from the rural areas. That's why you can see most of them here.
Trade between Africa and China soared by 11% last year, reaching $282 billion, with a second consecutive year of growth since the COVID-19 pandemic. China is now Africa's largest trading partner, and to facilitate this growing relationship, young people are now turning to learn the Chinese language. Our journalist Didier Sokba entered the class of these Beninese students determined to master Mandarin. Take a look. With an estimated trade volume of over $60 billion annually, China is Benin's third largest trading partner. In this context, speaking Mandarin is a great asset. Created in 2019 and set up on the campus of Abomi Kalavi, the Confucius Institute offers a degree in translation and interpretation in the Chinese language. The students of this school are the most sought after on the job market in Africa.
Apart from my studies, I'm also a translator-interpreter for Chinese. The reason that motivated me to choose the Chinese language is that I noticed there are many job opportunities with China. If you are an intern and haven't finished your studies, you can earn up to 150,000 CFA francs a month. If you have a degree in the Chinese language, your salary can rise from 250,000 to 500,000 CFA francs.
While the guaranteed minimum wage in Benin is 52,000 CFA francs, this is a great opportunity for students like Parfait. Other reasons why this training course is so successful among young people in the economic capital are quite diverse. My mother has a big wholesale business. She's a trader. And by learning the Chinese language, I can help my mom to develop this business. According to a report published in Beijing in 2021 by the China-Africa Business Council, Chinese private companies account for about 70% of investments in Africa. China carries out more than a third of the infrastructure projects on the continent. So, to facilitate exchanges between Chinese workers and employers, interpreters are much needed.
When we teach our students the Chinese language, they also learn the culture, the behavior, attitude, and all of that. It allows us to create an honest relationship with the Chinese. We have students trained at the institute who are not in Benin, but who work with the Chinese in countries like Angola, Côte d'Ivoire, and Togo. So the job market today for someone learning Chinese is promising.
In 2016, the Chinese spent $110 billion on international tourism. According to the World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, the number of Chinese tourists visiting the African continent is growing at a rate of around 50% each year. But the most visited countries are Morocco and Tunisia. Benin would also like to attract Chinese tourists through the students of the Confucius Institute.
Our students also serve as tour guides for Chinese tourists.
Oui, un exemple,
For example, a Chinese community wanted to visit the royal treasures at the Presidency Palace. It was our students who accompanied them.
Au palais de la présidence. Ce sont nos étudiants qui les ont accompagnés. Donc c'est pour dire en fait que dans le domaine du tourisme,
In the field of tourism, there are great opportunities for these students.
opportunités pour ces étudiants.
Cuisina is one of the leading companies of furniture and home furnishing in the West African sub-region. An expertise learned in China and an acute knowledge of Chinese, the young kitchen designer Muamin Adechokan, the CEO of Cuisina, has indeed found an innovative solution. He manufactures kitchen furniture with fully waterproof panels that meet the standards of African kitchens. To do this, he imports all the materials from China without intermediaries. His customers are large West African construction companies, and these kitchens are a great success compared to kitchen furniture imported from Europe that are less suited to the conditions on the continent.
La Chine m'a appris la langue.
China taught me the language, which is the key to success and of what I am today.
C'est ce que je suis aujourd'hui. Les Chinois sont spéciaux.
Chinese people are special. It doesn't matter if the Chinese understand English or French well, you automatically create a barrier if you don't speak their language.
Vous créez une barrière. Je suis rentré en Afrique et là
I returned to Africa and set up my industry, Cuisina.
Cuisina.
After traveling through several African countries, this Chinese representative is the head of the subsidiary of Jiangxi Water and Hydropower Construction, settled in Benin in 2017. This company specializes in building and construction, public works, and hydroelectricity. Liu Zhaoping is proud of his collaboration with the Beninese workers.
It is very important. These workers who have studied the Chinese language allow us to better trade between Beninese and Chinese communities.
Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, Sino-African cooperation has maintained its momentum. With the development of trade, the prospects of this cooperation still have a bright future ahead, and making Africa a very attractive playing field in the eyes of Beijing. Meanwhile, some critical voices are being raised about Beijing's role in the African debt. According to a recent report by the British research institute Chatham House, China accounts for 12% of Africa's $700 billion external debt. Washington and the IMF have singled out Beijing's tough stance in negotiations over Zambia's debt restructuring. But during his tour of Africa last month, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang said China rejected the label of debt-trapped. And to talk about it, I'm joined by Dr. Alex Vines of the British Research Institute Chatham House. He has contributed to the report, The Response to Debt Distress in Africa and the Role of China. Dr. Alex Vines, hello, and thank you for joining me on Business Africa. So the findings of the report show that the image of China as a predatory lender looking to expropriate African economic assets does not stand up in most cases. Could you summarize why?
So we did a study which we published in December, and we looked at a number of African countries in depth, including Angola, Djibouti, Zambia, South Africa, Congo Brazzaville, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire. And the research findings suggested that in most cases, there wasn't any evidence of direct entrapment. It was partly to do with different Chinese agencies offering loans in not a coordinated, disorganized way. It was also the governments themselves, the African governments, making all sorts of requests of which the Chinese wouldn't question too deeply. But we did find one country where we felt that maybe the lending was more deliberate and that was to entrap, and that was Djibouti.
The report also shows that Chinese financial institutions might have a lot to improve in their dealings with Africa. Could you take us through this finding?
I think it's a more general Chinese problem, and that they're in competition with each other. They're all trying to interpret what Premier Xi and the Communist Party of China's ultimate objectives are, but then they're extemporizing and doing their own thing, and they're in competition with each other also for kind of potentially for influence. And that makes a very disorganized result, which is why I think we have this messiness in certain situations, like we've seen in Zambia in particular. So, not all Chinese lending is by any means bad. And we did find some examples of quality projects that definitely provide benefit to the African governments and populations that have been focused on. And also, it's clear that there's experimentation and learning from failure.
And finally, according to what we know so far, where does this leave us in terms of debt restructuring in Africa? The IMF and China seem to be in disagreement about the issue of the Zambian debt.
So this is a live issue, and I think in 2023 we're going to see more countries finding it difficult with interest rates having been hiked the way they are to repay their loans. And so my hope is that there are two things. One is that G7 countries coordinate better, but more importantly, the G20, which is where the common framework, which is the successor of the debt suspension initiative, DSSI. The G20 also works out learns from the initial common framework countries, which are Chad, Ethiopia, and Zambia, but now Ghana. And kind of streamline the process and work out a better system. Key in the future will be more transparency, but in the short term, it's liquidity and helping countries that aren't just simply unable to pay their debt burdens is really important, and that's a mixture of recrafting, rescheduling, repurposing debt. And a degree of debt forgiveness also. Well, I don't like the word. So debt cancellation.
Dr. Alex Vines, thank you. In the energy sector, developments are continuing on the continent. With the Italian major Eni, for example, the Italian giant has signed an agreement with Libya's National Oil Corporation to invest in 2 natural gas fields. And in sub-Saharan Africa, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has launched the drilling campaign on the Kingfisher oil field in Lake Albert. 40,000 barrels of crude oil per day are expected by 2025. But the project, which would allow Uganda to become a major oil producer, is heavily criticized by environmentalists. We are now heading for Central Africa, where, as you know, the 2 financial markets of the CEMAC, the Central African Economic and Monetary Community, have merged. The Douala Stock Exchange and the Central African Stock Exchange in Libreville has indeed become one. This new regional stock exchange located in Douala had a hard time convincing rather timid investors, but it won its bet thanks to successful bond issues. Abubakar Munchili, our correspondent, went to discover this new stock exchange, clearly a gateway to a vast regional financial market. To find out more, take a look. We are at the headquarters of the Central African Securities Exchange, the BVMAC, in the heart of the Accra business district in Douala, the economic capital of Cameroon. It became the only stock exchange in the sub-region. A real hope in the CEMAC zone, the Central African Economic and Monetary Community.
Nous avons depuis le 4 juillet 2019.
Since July the 4th, 2019, we have witnessed the merger acquisition of Douala Stock Exchange, which was the Cameroon Stock Exchange and the Central African Securities Exchange, namely the BVMAC, whose headquarters were in Libreville. The heads of states had, therefore, decided to integrate the financial markets of Central Africa. We, as professionals, are very satisfied because it still allows us to have a common discourse vis-à-vis those wishing to invest in the stock markets or to float their companies.
For nearly 16 years, from 2003 to 2019, the CEMAC zone was indeed marked by the coexistence of two competing stock markets, resulting in painful consequences for the local business community.
We suffered a lot from the fact that there were two active stock exchanges, two regulatory bodies in the CEMAC zone. Thus, it did not allow issuers and all those who wanted to float their companies on the stock market to be able to choose one financial centre or another.
Since then, the single stock exchange and two key players have been driving the financial market in the sub-region. First, the regulator, which is the Central African Market Surveillance Commission, CASUMA, then the Bank of Central African States, the BIAC, which acts as a settlement bank.
Au-delà donc de ces acteurs centraux,
beyond these central players, therefore, we have around 15 brokerage firms that are approved by the regulator, whose role is to serve as an intermediary between the public that needs to invest and the issuers. Next to these actors, who are the intermediaries, there is, of course, the economic operators themselves, because without the economic operators, without investors, without issuers, there is no exchange in the financial markets.
Allios Finance Cameroon is a leasing company. It is among the first companies in Central African sub-region to understand that the arrival of the stock exchange represented a great opportunity for the business community in the sub-region.
Pour l'expérience, au début, on avait quelques...
On an experimental aspect, at the beginning, we did have some questions. But I must say that it was rather a great experience, a great success. The players in the stock market in Central Africa are in fact listening to companies. We were looking for 8 billion CFAF. We had a subscription rate of 110%. It means that there really is a need for institutional investors on this market. For the past 2 or 3 years, we have been listed on the Douala Stock Exchange, and things are going very well.
In just 4 months, for example, between December 2020 and March 2021, 3 fundraising operations were recorded. Other loans and the IPO of public companies from different CEMAC countries are announced and expected on the regional stock exchange. Performance that still poorly reflects the economic potential of the CEMAC zone.
There is some reluctance. I believe that it's a problem of stock market culture, communication and training of various economic actors. So our programs today essentially go in that direction, namely to promote the Central African Securities Exchange in Douala, to make the place attractive, create more awareness among students, for example. We want them to consider taking finance and stock market into account in their training, and even start from the primary school level. From the grassroots to the highest level, people should be able to understand how the stock markets are essential to fund their businesses and activities. Also, to be able to invest their savings in a safe and credible way. So that's the job we're doing now. You cannot have a solid CEMAC economy without a performing stock market. We cannot do without a stock exchange. So it is absolutely necessary that the stock market thrives. So we are working a lot today on the regulatory framework to change, improve the various CEMAC regulatory texts to make the regulatory framework of the stock market more competitive.
The CEMAC zone is destined to have a performing financial market if it wants to pursue and consolidate its economic development. A myriad of incentives, plus the willingness of the players and the growing enthusiasm of companies for the Central African Stock Exchange, are proof that the sub-region of the African continent can become a land of opportunity for many investors and businesses. Welcome back to the second part of our show. It's over. The deadline imposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria for exchanging old national currency notes, the Naira, has expired on January 31st. The central bank was hoping to retrieve back an equivalent of $4.3 billion. The aim is to monitor an uncontrolled growth of liquidities on the market. New banknotes have been in circulation since mid-December. But what's the situation on the ground, and are these new notes available everywhere? Let's ask our correspondent in Abuja, Hugo Yuana. Hello Hugo, thank you for joining us. So can you tell us what's the situation right now?
Well, Asha, we are not there quite yet. Just before the deadline, the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, had said that the currency swap had achieved more than 75% success rate and that just 25% of the currency remained outside the system. These last days, old notes were already being rejected by small businesses and market stalls, but only 1,000 Naira notes can easily be accessed at ATMs and banks. Lower denominations are very difficult to get, which added to the anguish of many Nigerians with old banknotes desperately trying to board commercial vehicles to exchange them. The frustration has now led the CBN to actually extend the timeline for returning old banknotes from January 31st to February 10th with an additional grace period of 7 days.
Hugo Yuana, our correspondent in Abuja. The diaspora remittances will soon be reaching the same level as foreign exchange earnings, a paradoxical situation for Kenya. According to the central bank, the diaspora remittances brought more than $4 billion to Kenyans back home in 2022. However, exports brought in $5.77 billion over the same period. This result raises concerns and even fears about the potential impact of an economic downturn in Western countries. The majority of this financial windfall comes from the United States. 59%. This is the percentage of rural people in sub-Saharan Africa. This figure had declined since the 60s when it was over 85%. Many Africans are migrating to the cities, and some have decided to take their ancestral know-how with them to cultivate the land. The result is urban farms like this one in Nairobi. Peter Wakaba went to meet those urban farmers in the concrete jungle.
According to World Bank data, 70% of the world's poor live in rural areas, with agriculture being the main source of income and employment. With the increasing trend of rural-urban migration, it is only just emerging that quite a large number of them are taking farming with them from the village to the city, creating a new trend that is urban farming. It is in this grey urban jungle that we encounter Francis Washira, an urban farmer who, like his crops, makes a living surrounded by concrete. If he's not busy training the next batch of young Kenyan farmers, he's kept engaged tending his crops.
We grow everything, but we especially encourage people to grow local vegetables from the rural areas. That's why you can see most of them here. And we also have some herbs, very important for our bodies. And we also have some maize here. We have sugarcane, as you can see the guys eating them. We all have all different types.
Francis has been looking after his vegetable garden for the last 10 years. Over that time, growing a steady clientele for his vegetables and herbs, most of whom are his neighbors.
There are those of us who like really fresh vegetables. You can't really be sure of the stuff you get in the market. When it was harvested, some of it is no good. So we mostly prefer vegetables from this small garden.
The rapid increase in urbanization and the subsequent rise in urban food insecurity has resulted in the mushrooming of this kind of agriculture in urban centers. Then there is the trend towards healthy organic food, even among the lower echelons of society. Increased awareness about the negative health effects of food from the industrial food chain is itself a big reason why urban farmers grow their own food.
We like these greens because we plant them ourselves. No chemical fertilizer, just organic manure from chickens and rabbits. The rest is not as tasty and easy to cook.
His small urban farm has made Francis famous, with interest from far and wide, including a young generation of students all eager to learn and replicate his success.
Farming is a business and it can give you money. With other business, it can give you any variety that you need. Money for school fees, money for rent, money for food. When I go back to the community, I can show them this crop can be eaten by a rabbit, you also can eat it.
In fact, demand is so high that it has attracted the attention of multinational companies and international bodies seeking to cash in on the trend. Amiran is the Kenyan arm of a British conglomerate, the Bolton CP Group, which has operations in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Zambia, Ghana, and Nigeria. The company works to help small African farmers improve efficiency and yields through the introduction of modern technology like irrigation and greenhouses.
Amiran Farmer Kit here is a concept that we developed with our team in Kenya in order to improve the livelihood and the capacity building for the people of Africa, not only Kenya. In it, we include the 3 pillars for success that are missing right now in Kenya. We are including, first of all, the knowledge by giving training to the farmer when they buy the kit. We are giving the do-how, which is the coaching how to grow with agricultural support, if it's online or with a growing guide and with agronomists on the ground. This is the do-how. And we are giving also the farmer, we are giving the high quality inputs.
It is a fact that for many of the urban farmers, especially the youth, innovation and the utilization of technology such as these are the only ways to attract them and transition them from subsistence farming to farming as a business, especially with their proximity to the ready and willing urban market.
I'm looking forward to having a big company, but not only that. My big thing that I want to achieve is to encourage the youth that you have seen here. If I can change Kenyan, their mind, their way of thinking, because when people come here, we tell them, we don't train you anything. We just change your way of thinking and your way of doing things. If I can achieve that within 2 or 3 years, I'll be comfortable guy. Because I know I will not grow old if I can see somebody also growing. Because as I told you, whichever way I'm going, I don't want to go alone. I want to go with my community.
It is a dream that still has ample room to grow, especially with his project still very small, and with many other African countries still to become food secure, even in the urban setting. The example set by these Kenyans is one that should and can be emulated in other cities around the African continent.
Well, that's it for today. Business Africa is over. I'll see you next week, same time, same channel for Initiative Africa. We'll host the great Nigerian artist Bruce Onobrak-Peya. In the meantime, you can watch this show again on our news website, africaonair.com, and follow us on all our social media channels. Feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time. Goodbye.